a beautiful thing that we are celebrating, right? The commitment that we have to our own Christ nature. And it's an individual process, an individual journey. And when we can witness other people doing so and living it, it's inspiring and it lifts us all up. And as I sit with the graduating class and all that we have been a part of, and that it just so happens that it's during Advent that we've done this graduation, it really made me think of all of us, because we've all been on some journey this year, and we've all been invited to go deeper into who we are and how we show up in life. And so, what is the Advent that is here, right? And we are in the Advent season, and a lot of times during Advent and during the Christmas holiday, we really focus on, well, the friends and the family and the celebration. And traditionally, we celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ over 2,000 years ago. And as we do that, as we honor and celebrate it, can we also honor and celebrate what it means for the Christ to be born right here and right now? So we can do both. Celebrate something that took place 2,000 years by our way shower who came to show us that we have an innate power within us that we can live into, and celebrate the Christ being born in us, reborn in us in this very moment. Charles Fillmore, our Unity co-founder, said about Christmas, "It does not belong to the past. It is a vital, living, present truth. The bringing forth of the Christ child is not a work that is finished in Bethlehem. It is taking place in our midst every day. It is this that we celebrate." And so how are you celebrating that Christ being reborn within you? How are you honoring the season of Advent that really invites us to recognize that there's something around the corner? There's something in the horizon. But we don't have to think of the horizon or around the corner as something far in the distance. It is literally just right here, right now, around the corner of our choice to allow that Christ Spirit to be reborn in such a way that it anchors us in truth and allows us to live in the world in a different way. Now, Unity co-founders Charles and Myrtle Fillmore understood that Christmas was a season of great joy and great expectancy, but also that it is an inner celebration. It is something that is taking place inside of us, that the Christ is being born here now within our own heart and within the heart of humanity. And so are you ready for what's to come? Are you ready for this Advent season? And are you willing to see it not only as a season, but the advent of something within you, the advent of a new you that is stepping through in this very moment, that has been calling out, whether we think it's being called out in the world outside of us because we see that we are being called to a greater understanding of truth, or this inner call that has been pulling and pushing us to express ourselves and understand ourselves in a different way. See, Advent is a process that is taking place within us. Do you feel it? It's okay if you don't. Right? Like, we talk about the holiday season, and so many of us, myself included, have this joy and are already looking to gather with friends and family and have that. And some people don't have that same kind of feeling, right, as they're moving through this. The question is, are you willing to feel excited about the advent of a new you that is shaping up and that is looking to be expressed through you? And if you don't, let me tell you, it's okay. There are things that we can do to get excited. There are things that we can do to be willing to open ourselves up to experiencing it. So this is really about who we are choosing and willing to become right here. A choice, a decision right now. So it's a decision to understand that whatever has plagued you, whatever has limited you, whatever has kept you playing small, that whatever ways in which you thought you were something that you're really not, because we know that in truth, we are the expressions of the Christ and the expressions and the activity of God in the world. Whatever it was that kept us from fully acknowledging that truth, that it is the past. That is not what we carry into this moment. That is not what we carry into the future. That the old way of being, we can just look at the old way of being, the old patterns of being, and just say, that's the old me. And that we can look into living into our own Christhood here and now and say, that is the new me. It's a shift that we get invited into. And it's not just a shift that we get invited to during Advent and during the Christmas holiday. If you've been paying attention on Sundays, this is really the invitation that we have moment by moment, Sunday by Sunday, lesson by lesson. And it's still a shift that we have to choose to make. And the shifting in it is what our salvation is, right? Like, so many people look at Jesus, the human, as the salvation that is to come. Our salvation is in choosing and shifting the way that we see ourselves as the Christ. Romans chapter 12, verse 2 says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." And you know what is good and acceptable and perfect? Our own inner Christ. Lucky us that there is something within us that is good, acceptable, and perfect, and that it is our ultimate truth. And so it's already innately within us. And so our work really is to just be fully open to it rising from us and moving through us into our life and into the world. For far too long, many people have been conformed to an old way of seeing Jesus as the exception instead of Jesus as the way shower, reminding us that everything he was able to do, he did through his own owning of his truth and his relationship to God, and that we have that ability too. And for too long, we have also been conformed to this idea that our salvation will be when Jesus comes back, the second coming of Jesus. Well, we know that in unity, in metaphysics, in this philosophy that we're in, we're not looking for some human to show up and save us. We are looking to embody our own salvation by knowing that the second coming of Christ is not in a distant place or time. It is in this moment when we accept our truth and we allow that Christ spirit to rise up. That is the second coming of Christ that you and I may have been waiting for, but you and I can choose to not longer wait for it because it has arrived. It has arrived because it is within our hearts, and it is pushing. In this very moment, I hope that you feel how it is pushing to be expressed and to be lived in you and through you. Now, Charles Fillmore, he once shared a story of this traditional belief in the second coming of Christ. See, as you probably have seen, there are so many people that talk about the year and the time and the place where Jesus, the man, is coming for a second time. And it was happening around the time of Charles Fillmore. And there was a gentleman named William Miller, who was a religious leader of the 1800s, and he said that Jesus and the second coming was going to be between 1843 and 1844, so around the time of Charles Fillmore. And Charles shared that one of these Millerite followers really believed it and actually thought that it was happening that weekend. And so the story goes that this guy put on his ascension robe and went, he lived in a farm outside of Kansas City, and went and had a haystack, and so sat on top of the haystack waiting for Jesus to show up again. He fell asleep. And there were these little mischievous boys. By the way, before I say this, nobody was hurt in this story. But so this mischievous boy saw that this guy was laying and falling asleep on the hay, and of course thought, what if we set it on fire? And so they set it on fire. I said nobody got hurt. because all of a sudden he felt, this guy felt the heat, smelled the smoke, woke up and saw himself surrounded by this fire. And in his mind, what he screamed out was, wow, the resurrection is here and I'm in hell just as I expected. True story that Charles Fillmore tells, he had heard about. What is your expectation about the second coming of Christ? What is your expectation about life? Are you expecting to live into hell? To live into limitation? To live into feeling like we have to play small? Or are you willing in this very moment to expect the good? To expect divinity showing up through and as us, to expect health and wholeness and abundance and all the good that we know God is through us. Is your expectation limitation? No, that's the old me. Is your expectation full potential of the divine? Yes, that is the new me. The reality is that we don't have to wait for Christ to show up in the flesh in the future. Because I believe that Christ never left. Christ has been living in the flesh through each and every one of us. The question is, are we the ones that are willing to fully now live into that truth? To not only allow the second coming of Christ, but then to show up in the world where it is how we are in the world as the third coming of Christ. Christ not only in us, but expressing in the world. See, Christ is God's idea of you. Like, take a moment to own that. Christ is God's idea of you and in you. Christ is the divine plan at work, God manifesting as you. Charles Fillmore also said, they will tell you, lo, here is the Christ, and lo, there. But the kingdom of God is within you. It is within every one of us. And the more we search for that inner kingdom and comply with the law, the more we will know about the second coming. The more we will realize that the second coming is here right now. Now, in traditional Christian observance of Advent that we are moving through, it really is a time of fasting and a time of prayer. And we can own those practices too for ourselves. What is it that we want to fast from during this time? To release and let go of, so that we aren't tied up with those things and that Christ's essence can rise up to take its rightful place as us. And what is it that we want to hold in prayer? In Unity, we believe that prayer is that accelerated thought, the highest level of thinking that we can have. And so as you are fasting and releasing the limitations, the old patterns, what has not served you, what is it that you want to hold in consciousness for yourself? And it can be things within your love life, relationships, at work, whatever it is, just be clear about it. Be honest about it and be willing to hold it in consciousness, to speak it to yourself and speak it out loud, to believe in yourself and believe in the advent of the new you that is taking place. It is within you asking to be unleashed. Eric Butterworth says, the seed can become the tree because the tree is in the seed. You can become what you desire to be because the Christ, your divine potential, is within you. Don't limit the way that that potential shows up in the world. The tree is within the seed, just waiting for the opportunity to be watered, to be cared for, so that it can rise up and be the tree it was always, I was going to say meant to be, but the tree that it always was, the same as us. And so during this time of Advent, there are 4 practices, right, that each week we get invited into, or to hold at least. And so my invitation for us is to use those 4 tools of Advent. So how can we have unconditional faith? Unconditional faith in who we are, in whose we are, in what we are. Christ incarnate, the full potential of the divine. How can we have unconditional faith that when the old patterns start slipping in, that when the world around us is telling us it's okay, you should play it small, or we're not sure how this is going to look for you, or we get focused on outer circumstances, have unconditional faith that won't move us anymore, that the advent of who we are is so strong that we will not be shaken from it. How can we have that unconditional faith? And what comes to me usually around this time is that verse from Romans, Christ in you, the hope of glory. And I realized that so many times when we share it, it's always, because we read it verbatim, right? So it's like, Christ in you, the hope of glory. And what would it look like if today we actually honor and we affirm it and own it as Christ in me, the hope of glory. Christ in me. Like really feel into it, right? Like, as I see other people doing this, let's do it. Like feel it. Let's affirm. Christ in me, the hope of glory. Christ in me, the hope of glory. And then also be able to have unconditional peace. Unconditional peace. Peace being our divine nature, and life happens. As the Daily Word was showing all these different examples of when we can call for peace, because guess what? Those situations happen, and we have to be conscious enough to call for that sense of peace, because sometimes we can get lost. Sometimes the stress and the anxiety and the situation can try to get the best of us, and unconditional peace is our truth. Unconditional peace is our practice. As we're moving through the holiday season, some people are all excited about seeing friends and family. Some people are not at peace with seeing friends and family, right? There are so many things that especially during the holidays, can keep us, or that we can allow to keep us from experiencing peace, and that's not who you are anymore. That's who you are not choosing to be anymore. We can also move into unconditional love this season. And a lot of times we think about the love that we're expressing to others, which is beautiful. And how can we express that unconditional love to ourselves? Because situations do arise. We sometimes don't show up in peace. We sometimes don't fully connect to that abundance of faith that is within us. And can we be gentle with ourselves in that? Instead of adding and piling on feelings of limitations, unworthiness, whatever it may be, can we be unconditionally loving to ourselves and say, yeah, it happened, and that's who I was in the past. That is not who I am in this moment. Because birthing something new, I don't know if you've heard, maybe you've lived or experienced, but it can be challenging, it can be painful, it can be messy. And so, okay, it might be messy, it might be painful, it might be challenging, and unconditional faith, unconditional peace, and I'm going to love myself through it, and moving into unconditional joy. And I don't think of joy myself as just being happy, And joy is something deeper, right? And joy is something that we can expect. We can have expectant joy. So maybe you're not feeling joyous in this moment. You can feel expectant joy. That there is joy about to show up, that there is joy that you can expect to live into. And so how can we move into unconditional joy, expectant joy? Charles Fillmore said that being reborn into our Christhood, it is a perfect ecstasy. I'm sure some of you have felt that before. I'm sure that some of you have lived into that sense of ecstasy when realizing just what amazing expressions of the divine that we are. And if you haven't, then just expect it. Expect that ecstasy. Expect that joy. And speak out loud, you ain't seen nothing yet. So during this time, So during this time, let us fast and let us pray. Let us release and let us welcome. So what, for example, would we say to an old limiting way of being? That's the old me, right? So what are we going to say to old limiting ways of being? That old me. Living into our Christhood here and now, that's the new me. Thinking that I don't have enough, that's the old me. Knowing that we live in an abundant and loving universe, that's the new me. Feeling limited by the world of circumstances, that's the old me. Knowing that we are unlimited in nature and in our own Christhood, that is the new me. Getting caught up with the judgments of myself and others, knowing that I am the Christ and I can witness the Christ in others. Internalizing the external world of sense, expressing the internal world of spirit. That's the new me. Lacking, abundant. See, you feel it in this moment, and you know the choices that are before us and the choices that we get to live into and express and have already made. We just have to allow ourselves to live with the choice that we have said yes to the Christ being reborn in us. And nothing can stop that second coming of Christ that is being born in us in this very, very moment, here and now. And so this is the advent of a new way of being. And let us celebrate it. Let us honor it. Do not play it small. Do not be limited. This is a whole new you and a whole new world. And we can hold it, we can take it, and we can flow with it. As John chapter 1, verse 9 says, there it was, the true light which, coming into the world, enlightens everyone. Christ was in the world. I'll say Christ is in the world, as Christ is in each and every one of us. Namaste. Thank you so much for visiting our YouTube channel. We post new videos every week to keep you positive, present, and inspired to your divinity. Please click on the subscribe button below and also that notification bell. Remember to share this with your friends and your family, those that you know will be inspired just like you have been. And always remember that we love you, that we bless you, that we behold the Christ in you, and we see you doing great things. Thanks and take care.